One of the most important things to note is that natural selection may act upon a beneficial mutation, something that would help you survive in a different environment. But at no point in history, or in the present, or even in the future, will you see a group of beneficial mutations that will change an organism into a completely different type of organism, from a family to a different type of family. It just doesn't happen. Dogs will always produce dogs, cats will always produce cats, and we did not all descend from a common ancestor. The reason that people believe that we actually descended from a common ancestor is because we share similar DNA with that of chimps and other creatures. Now, this is just proof of common design, not common descent. Common design means that we are all on the same playground. We are all on the same planet. And so therefore, since we're all in one environment, it would make sense then that the Creator would design us with similar strands of DNA. And sure enough, that is what we find. But this does not mean that we all descended from a common ancestor and that mutations are what brought us up to where we are today.
If you compare the chromosomes, say, of, a human and many other life forms, they're very similar. Okay, if you compare height, and you compare how many children one animal has and another, and then you could put that on a chart and say, that they're related. There's some kind of progression of evolution, but if you look at just the chromosomes, some tobacco plants have 48 chromosomes, whereas the human chromosomes only equal 46. So if we just keep evolving, eventually we'll be a tobacco plant, right? I know some people who are already on the way. You get in the elevator and you say, man, you're evolving. And yes, there are similarities. Okay, Microsoft Word and Microsoft PowerPoint have many similarities, but that doesn't mean that they evolved from Morse code 3 billion years ago. So the simple fact is, just because you can exchange the lug nuts on a Pontiac with those of a Chevy doesn't mean that they evolved from a skateboard. Okay, there is a common designer, not a common ancestor. And in genetics, you have to take certain sections of the gene pool, okay, and then compare them to the human gene code. Now, just because I can compare things, and they match in one area doesn't mean that other areas aren't different, okay? There's many genetic differences between humans and apes, and a 5th grader can figure it out in basic genetics, a class on basic genetics. Many differences between humans and apes genetically, even if they were 98% similar, which they aren't. These are 2% of a dramatic difference, okay? And that's just being generous, even if it is 98, but it's more like 90%. Now we have comparative anatomy. It says is the study of similarities and differences among structures of living species. For instance, the human, the cat, the frog, the bat, the bird all have a humerus, an ulna, and a radius. So it's a similar structure on all of them, suggesting they evolved from one creature, basically. Common ancestry. So you find similarities between different animals, such as these right here, the pharyngeal pouches of fish, reptiles, birds, and humans in early stages of reproduction in the embryo. They have these folds of skin, and in the different animals, they develop into different things, such as in humans, those folds of skin develop into glands in the eyes, ears, and throat. But they say that because this folds of skin represent the gills on a fish, that we actually evolved from a common ancestor because the similarities exist. Here's the thing about this particular piece of evidence right here is that the right-hand man, basically, of Ernst Haeckel, or of Charles Darwin, was a man named Ernst Haeckel. He made popular the theory of evolution in Germany and used these similarities, these gill slits, okay, as evidence that basically we evolved from fish, okay, that fish evolved into humans, and that's actually in peer-reviewed scientific literature, that some fish-like creature ended up, evolving into the mammals. So, because there's a similarity in the early stages of development. These pouches, there's a common ancestry, and the person who came up with this actually faked his drawings. He made animals in various stages of development. The embryos of those animals look more similar to each other than they actually are. He faked the evidence and was actually convicted by his own university of fraud. And, this piece of evidence, which is a known fraud, is still being used. They just throw homologous structures in there, and they're somehow supposed to get away with this. I mean, they use those gill pouches, though, as evidence, and they never have anything to do with breathing. I know people with several folds of skin under their chin, and they can't breathe through any of them except at the top. It's a useful structure, and similarities prove a common designer.
Homologous structures. So you have different structures in different animals, such as the penguin, the chicken, or the reptile, and the human and the bat. They all have, for instance, radius and ulna. Okay, they have like a limb with 5 or 4 digits coming out of it. And that's supposed to actually prove that we all came from one kind of animal. But I'm just wondering if there's maybe another way to look at it rather than common ancestry. Maybe we could get those gears going. Maybe we could find a way out of this horrible situation that we found ourselves in as creationists, as people that believe the Bible. Well, here you go. You got proof that God doesn't exist right here. You got a bat that has a very similar structure to a human. So it must mean that the bat and the human came from one animal long before either of them came into existence. That's one way of thinking, right?
The bat came from a fish.
The crick, the stag, the horse, the tiger, the bat, the rat, the monkey, the beetle.
Iger, you think that there could be another way to explain why there's similar structures in all of the animals? Like, why do we share a lot of the same DNA with a peanut, for instance?
All right, because we got a common designer, bro, and it just so happens that man, everything was made from the earth, so everything's gonna be all life even is made with pretty much the same composition.
Yeah, similar locomotion in a similar gravity environment and the same kind of atmospheric pressure and things that work. And and with common designer and common, living in the same biome is going to make it. I'm sure there's a lot of things that need to have similar DNA and, for all the different ways that we have similar digestion, similar, locomotion, all that stuff.
Yeah, I mean, everything comes from the earth, so we're gonna have a lot of similarities even with trees and plants. That's what we eat. So yeah, everything's gonna be pretty much about. I think we're all pretty much made of about the same, like carbon and I forget water. Basically, it's like we're all kind of like made out of the same things. Even the bananas and the people, we're all pretty much. We all come from the ground. We all come from dirt.
Yeah, you think about it, like we all do similar things. We climb things, we walk, we move in the same. I mean, it makes sense that even God would design different systems and then build upon them and modify them for the different kinds of creatures.
Yeah. Evolution, I guess, does make.
Well, that's funny, because Satan, he's put this in the textbooks, and it's like he knew that people were not going to investigate it. It's like
Teach the kids it all started with a Big Bang 14 billion years ago. That the Earth came to be 4.5 billion years ago, that we came from the first single cell organism came to be from non-organic matter 4 billion years ago. And then this thing eventually evolved into a fish that turned into an amphibian, and the amphibian to a reptile, the reptile to a bird, the bird to a mammal. Then you got the creation side saying that God made everything in 6 days, about 6,000 years ago, and the Bible's literally true. It hasn't lied or skipped a beat ever since they started writing it about 6,000 years ago. I guess maybe people will say Moses wrote it, so it would be more like around 3,000 or 4,000 years ago.
Isn't it amazing that until you're introduced to someone like Kent Hovind, you don't even think of the obvious. It's like the most crazy thing, because not a lot of people can see that. I get on the atheists hard, because they're having a hard time seeing what I can explain to them, to their face. Like I can tell them, and they still, they can't see it. They're just like, what? What are you even talking about, man? So homologous structure is not very complicated. If you tried to use that as evidence in an honest court of law, it would be laughed at by the jury. I could do it, in a honest court of law. The reason that creationists wasn't successful in the courtrooms is because those were big-headed, biased Christians that were trying to remove evolution from the textbooks. They didn't want it in. That's not scientific either, to suppress one view or another. You have to look at all possibilities. So they were trying to keep evolution out of the textbooks and trying to keep creationism in the textbooks. Neither of them are lawful in America. What we should do is teach science in the classroom, and if we want to discuss origins, we can have an origins class. We shouldn't call it science.